Ethiopians, a majority of Ethiopians in Ethiopia as well as abroad, strongly feel that CNN has covered the conflict over the past year in a manner that is highly biased and detached from context.
Our work, our reporting was conducted carefully and methodically by CNN's highly experienced team in the region and elsewhere. We stand by its findings as well as the language used in our reporting, which we believe is fully justified.
And the reports that most Western media are putting out are not accurate. The Western media, for many reasons, are supporting the TPLF and talking about a security situation in Addis Ababa that's not accurate.
There are also numerous reports coming out about stocks of weapons seized that have been kept hidden in individual households, mostly associated with people of the same ethnic background that the New York Times report tries to absolve as innocent victims.
ያንን አይተ መስጋት ብቻ ሳይሆን ቲፒኤልኤፍም እዛ ሆኖ እዚህ ቦታ የዚህን ያክል ኃይል አለኝ የሚያግዘኝ እኔን ዓላማ የሚያስፈጽም እያለም ቀድሞ እየተናገረ ነው።
TPLF is declaring to have so many supporters in the city to advance its cause that put undue pressure on the residents of the city to be highly suspicious of Tigrayans in their own neighborhood.
In the city, they have a wide, strong network of their own informants ready to receive them, ready to send out information, look at access points and weaknesses. So the government was monitoring them, in my opinion, and they caught them. And when they were caught, they weren't caught with, empty hands. They had satellite, radios. They had money that, is illegitimate. They had weapons. They had bombs. So they're not arrested because they're Tigrayan. They're arrested because they were assisting the TPLF, and they just happen to be Tigrayans.
Another article by the Canadian author and historian Jeff Pearce, published on November 27th last year, with the title How Western Media and Others Are Still Failing Ethiopia. Mr. Pearce highlights the BBC's seemingly innocent mistake related to a badly misquoted tweet from Prime Minister Abdi that was left up for 4 hours before the media organization had to apologize for the mistake. In another tweet from Reuters, a story about Ethiopia came out with footage of the wrong country. Though Mr. Pearce acknowledged that such mistakes sometimes do happen in news reporting, he still wonders how much of these mistakes might be an honest error as opposed to being too lazy to give a damn. Mr. Pearce also noted that going into the complex history doesn't fit a nice 500-word column or a 5-minute analyst interview on the TV networks, let alone a 30-second wraparound package for the evening edition. Today's conflict is often portrayed in North America and Europe as Abdi versus Tigray, without any recognition that Abdi remains popular with many within the country, and there are those in Ethiopia who support the federal troops moving in, and no doubt others who are more ambivalent and who strongly oppose it. In fact, you find few stories in Western media that even bother to ask ordinary Ethiopians what they think. In an interview with Aljazeera for the Listening Post program on hate speech and misinformation in Ethiopia's war, Birhan Taye, a digital researcher, does not agree how TPLF is being portrayed in the media reports that mostly fail to highlight the oppressive nature of the group during its 3 decades of iron grips to power.
TPLF for me is not a victim of this war. It's a perpetrator, one of the perpetrators of this war. And TPLF used to be the one that used to discredit journalists, the one that had arrested all of the journalists in the country, was the one that had kicked out all of the foreign journalists in the country, was the one that first shut down the internet. And they're very good at portraying themselves to be, the defenders of freedom, but they are not.
Birhan also highlights the destructive roles of the social media platforms in exacerbating the conflict in Ethiopia.
Facebook, Twitter, Telegram, TikTok, all of the social media platforms are a culprit here. Content online that is calling for violence, that is calling for the extermination of certain ethnic groups, and of course the majority of this content is coming out from the diaspora. So folks sitting out of their homes, Washington DC and London and Stockholm, these are not people sitting out of Addis or Mekelle that are putting out this misinformation and disinformation that we're seeing.
In the same article mentioned earlier, Mr. Lawrence Freeman indicated that there has been no official report of evidence by the US State Department or intelligence services verifying allegations of genocide or ethnic cleansing by the Ethiopian government. He said it's pathetic yet valuable to know that accusations against Ethiopia by the State Department, the House of Representatives, and the Senate have in large part come from news organizations. He then goes on to ask whatever happened to US intelligence capabilities, and he wonders whether the US intel gathering has been so corroded that it has to rely on private organizations who have their own agenda.
Narrative is put out, everybody mindlessly follows it. You have the case of the United States Senate earlier this year. I mean, the U.S. Senate is supposed to be the most thoughtful democratic body in the world. And yet I found these people to be incredibly ignorant and malleable. And basically they passed a resolution condemning Ethiopia. That was all, which they admitted they were lobbied by CNN and the TPLF lobbying group. So what happens is somebody in the Senate who's supposed to be intelligent will say, well, this is what the CNN says. This is what the reporters say. This is what the news media says. And they have no idea if it's true or not. They really don't even care. They just go along mindlessly aping and following and regurgitating what the media says. So the media is part of the operation.
Mr. Freeman says the media is part of what he refers to as geopolitical oligarchy, indicating the broader international political, economic, and security architecture of which the media do not operate independently, and they do not provide objective news as such.
Most people don't understand. The media are not objective. They're not truth seekers. They are part of the political landscape. They're owned by major corporations. The larger the media, the more international the media, the more it's controlled. And they actually work as part of this geopolitical oligarchy, is what I call them, who have their view of how the world should operate according to their diseased thinking called geopolitics. And the media follows along. And in some cases, some of the people in CNN have taken a leading role in determining how people think. They're not giving you objective news. Objective news really doesn't even exist, and they're not even trying to present it. They are part and parcel of the operation against Ethiopia now, as they have been in reporting other situations around the world.
It is in our recent memory that the media's reports amplifying President Bush's rhetoric that the Saddam administration possessed nuclear weapons was one of the major justifications for the US to send its troops launching military assaults against the regime and consequently removed Saddam from power. However, after much of the whole country fell under the occupation of the US troops, there was no evidence found to prove the alleged weapons of mass destruction that was the professed reason to justify the US military invasion of the country.
We have often shared that it seems Ethiopia is undergoing what seems like a coordinated media campaign to tarnish the image of the country, to tarnish the image of the Prime Minister and his administration. And media outlets like CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, and Reuters in particular, as well as others, have often chosen to carry an overly negative and skewed narrative, missing important nuances.
Of course, it may not be so surprising to see such skewed reporting by individual reporters who are apparently keen on tarnishing the images of the incumbent administration in Ethiopia than finding out and reporting on the truth behind the events currently unfolding in relation to the ongoing conflict in the northern parts of the country. What is rather more baffling is the fact that such biased reports, devoid of professionalism, should find their ways on these Western media outlets such as the CNN and the New York Times that used to be widely viewed, ironically, as standards of professional journalism for a very long time. It is indeed ominous that such internationally reputed media outlets would go down to their knees, compromising the standards of professional and ethical reporting to satisfy the hideous motives of certain destructive groups some of their own correspondents are apparently advocating for. That is indeed a warning sign of the demise of professionalism in the Western media outlets that have chosen to sacrifice the core values of professional reporting, notably accuracy, balance, and fairness.